At 9:16 and 49 seconds, a single contact reappears 19 nautical miles from USS Abraham Lincoln at Mach 6, and every defensive system on the carrier is looking at a fight it believes has already been won. 11 seconds earlier, two SM-6 interceptors had climbed into the upper atmosphere and destroyed what the Aegis combat system classified as the only Iranian missile in the air. The tactical display shows a kill. The engagement log shows a kill. The formation should be resetting for the next threat. Instead, Spy 6 is trying to build a new track on a target with 1/5 the radar cross-section of the missile that launched it, descending too fast, too low, and too late for the defensive sequence the Abraham Lincoln has relied on for 34 days of war. 61 seconds remain before impact. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Keene in Combat Information Center watches the new contact flicker in and out of the radar picture and asks the only question that matters: what survived? Nobody answers in the first 2 seconds because nobody in the room has an answer. The booster is gone. The debris cloud is confirmed. The intercept geometry was correct. What the system believed was happening was not what was actually happening. Iran had not fired a ballistic missile at the Abraham Lincoln. Iran had fired a delivery vehicle for a hypersonic glide body that separated before the intercept, went cold, dropped into the radar shadow below the destroyed booster, and spent the last 11 seconds diving toward the carrier on a track the formation never knew it had to defend. At 9:16 and 54 seconds, the contact stabilizes, range 17.8 nautical miles. Altitude 31,000 feet, speed Mach 5.7, bearing 082 relative. It is descending on the carrier's forward quarter, not the center line, not the island, not the escort screen. It is aimed at the bow section of the flight deck, where 4 FA-18F Super Hornets are being armed for a retaliatory launch. Keene orders 2 more interceptors. USS Delbert D. Black, 6.4 nautical miles off Abraham Lincoln's port beam, assigns the shots. The fire control computer begins solving for a target that should not exist. 56 seconds remain. To understand what is happening, you need to understand why this missile is more dangerous than the weapons Iran had already fired at American ships in the Arabian Sea. This is not dangerous because it is the fastest missile Iran has used. It is dangerous because it is built around a false kill. With the modified Fatah II that left the Iranian coast at 9:13 and 41 seconds, was never intended to survive all the way to the carrier. The booster was supposed to die. It was supposed to climb, radiate, and look exactly like the only threat in the sky so that Aegis would do what Aegis has done successfully for weeks: classify one missile, assign interceptors, destroy one missile, and reset. The real weapon was the glide body riding inside the thermal wake of the booster, protected from clean tracking by the same plume that made the booster easy to see. At 63,000 feet, 47 seconds before the SM-6 intercept, the glide body separated on a downward offset of 11 degrees, shut down its active emission package completely, and became a small, cold maneuvering target descending through the gap between long-range interception and close-in defense. Though Iran did not design this weapon to defeat the carrier's defenses, Iran designed it to make the carrier's defenses fight the wrong part of the weapon. Chief Petty Officer Daniel Reyes had been thinking about that problem for 19 days. Reyes was not the air defense commander. He was not in command of the ship. He sat 2 compartments away in the electronic warfare suite, listening to things other people considered background noise. 19 days earlier, after a failed Iranian strike against USS Gerald R. Ford, he had filed a 7-page assessment on an anomaly nobody else thought mattered. In 3 separate attacks, a civilian marine satellite burst had appeared for less than half a second just before terminal phase. The signal had not come from the missile. It had come from somewhere on the water. Reyes argued that Iran was using disguised commercial vessels inside shipping lanes as covert targeting relays, passing one last position update to missiles after launch, and outside the normal military emission patterns, the strike group was hunting. The assessment was reviewed, logged, and buried under more immediate concerns, because nothing had been hit, no relay vessel had been identified, and the carrier groups were built to defend against launchers, not trawlers pretending to be part of civilian traffic. At 9:16 and 57 seconds, while CIC is trying to understand the new contact, Reyes is not watching the radar track. He is looking at a burst transmission that just hit his passive display at 9:16 and 46 seconds, 3 seconds before SPY-6 reacquired the glide body. It lasted 0.4 seconds. Civilian band uplink, narrow beam, was origin bearing 196 relative from the carrier's current course. The same signature he wrote about 19 days earlier. He pulls up the emissions archive and sees a second detail nobody else in CIC can see yet. The signal was not just present, it was directional. It transmitted toward the missile's terminal corridor, not toward shore, which means the glide body did not just survive the booster intercept. It received a final target update after the intercept. Iran was not relying on launch coordinates. Iran was steering the weapon in real time. At 9:17 and 02 seconds, the first of Delbert D. Black's 2 SM-6 interceptors clears the destroyer's vertical launch cells. The second follows 4 seconds later. Keane now has 1 glide vehicle, 2 interceptors, 48 seconds to impact, and a target that continues shifting its descent path by fractions of a degree that are too small to look dramatic and large enough to corrupt every firing solution built more than 5 seconds earlier. That is the hidden logic of the attack. A ballistic missile is dangerous because of speed. A glide vehicle like this is dangerous because speed and maneuver together compress the kill chain faster than doctrine can correct. The ship does not run out of missiles first. It runs out of time. At 9:17 and 08 seconds, Reyes calls CIC. The missile was updated from the surface. Civilian band burst, bearing 196. It has a relay. Keane tells him to mark the emission and stand by. She does not dismiss him. She cannot act on it yet because the immediate problem is still the glide body at 13.1 nautical miles. CIC has 42 seconds left and 2 interceptors in the air. The bridge maintains course because any major maneuver before the next intercept window would degrade the solution further. That is exactly what the weapon is designed to force. Hold steady and remain targetable. Maneuver early and make your own defense collapse. At 9:17 and 15 seconds, the glide vehicle drops below 24,000 feet and executes its first visible terminal correction. It is not a violent turn. It is a measured lateral shift of 2.2 degrees to port, just enough to force Delbert D. Black's lead interceptor to chase a geometry that no longer exists. The SM-6 reaches projected intercept at 9:17 and 19 seconds and detonates 170 meters above and aft of the target. Too far. The fragmentation cloud passes through empty air. The glide body continues inbound. If 31 seconds remain, the second interceptor is already climbing into a worse picture. The first miss did not just fail to kill the target. It confirmed the target's design. The glide body is not making large evasive moves. It is making exact, low-authority corrections timed to the rhythm of the American kill chain. Iran calculated how long it takes a ship to detect, classify, solve, assign, and fire. Then it built a weapon that moves just enough to make each solution stale by the time the interceptor arrives. At 9:17 and 21 seconds, Reyes stops waiting. He overlays the 0.4 second burst with merchant traffic bearings and finds a match 22 nautical miles south of the carrier's track. A small coastal freighter that had been drifting at 4 knots for 51 minutes inside a lane where everyone else was making 12 to 16. And it had transmitted no distress call, no course update, no engine report, Nothing except the same short uplink Reyes had seen before. The ship's AIS identity says Panamanian Registry. The emission pattern says Iranian Fire Control Relay. Reyes knows what that means because the earlier assessment he wrote included one estimate that now matters more than anything on the tactical display. If the final update is transmitted before the glide vehicle begins terminal weaving, the missile's control authority is finite. It cannot absorb a large target shift in the last seconds of flight if the final geometry changes faster than the fins can correct. At 9:17 and 24 seconds, the second SM-6 detonates. This one is closer, 90 meters off the glide body's starboard side. Fragments strike the outer thermal skin and tear away part of the heat shield. But the vehicle does not break apart. It yaws, sheds speed, and keeps coming. 26 seconds remain. Keene now has a damaged glide body, no more clean long-range intercept geometry, and the inner layer of defense about to inherit a problem it was never built to solve. Phalanx SAM EWS is designed to kill missiles that stay in the radar picture. It is not designed to work miracles against a hypersonic glider already inside the formation. Reyes calls again. This time he does not speak to CIC. He calls the bridge and asks for the officer of the deck. The weapon got its last coordinates from a surface relay. If we hold course, it hits the bow. If we shift hard starboard now and put an active decoy off the old line, it chases the wrong point. It cannot pull enough cross-range at this speed. There are 23 seconds to impact. The officer of the deck asks one question. Are you certain? Reyes answers with the only certainty available in that room, certain enough that staying on this course gives it the coordinates it was built to kill. At 9:17 and 28 seconds, the bridge orders all ahead, flank and hard starboard rudder 30 degrees. At the same moment, USS Delbert D. Black launches a Nulka active missile decoy 600 meters off the Abraham Lincoln's previous track line. The decision is not elegant. It is not clean. It forces the carrier into a violent turn while ordnance crews are still securing the forward deck. It also does one thing the Iranian calculation did not expect. It creates two targets where the weapon expected one, a carrier moving off the updated coordinates and a bright active emitter appearing where the carrier had been seconds earlier. At 9:17 and 31 seconds, the glide body drops through 12,000 feet. Phalanx mounts begin tracking. The forward CIWS opens fire at 9:17 and 33 seconds. The burst walks across the target corridor and misses by 14 meters as the glider shifts again toward the decoy line. That is the first proof Reyes was right. The weapon is no longer flying the original intercept path. It is correcting toward the false picture, but the correction is incomplete because the glide body is damaged and the turn rate available at this speed is limited. It now has to choose between the carrier's old coordinates and the stronger emitter that just appeared off the starboard quarter. It does not have enough time to solve both. At 9:17 and 36 seconds, Reyes sends the relay freighter's bearing to an MH-60R Seahawk already airborne 17 nautical miles west on screen support. The helicopter turns immediately. At the same second, an EA-18G Growler 68 miles away receives the civilian band frequency Reyes has tracked and begins transmitting a high-power noise blanket across the relay channel. That does not save the carrier in the next 10 seconds. It saves every ship in the next hour if more missiles are coming. But first, the Abraham Lincoln has to live through the one already descending at Mach 4.8. At 9:17 and 39 seconds, the glide body reaches 6,000 feet. The carrier has moved 110 meters off the path it occupied when the Iranian relay transmitted its last update. The Nulka decoy is now the strongest emitter inside the weapon's forward search basket. The damaged glide vehicle makes its hardest correction of the engagement 3.4 degrees toward the decoy line. If that is too much for a clean hit on the carrier and not enough for a clean hit on the decoy, it is now flying into the gap between what it was told the carrier would be and where the carrier actually is. Phalanx fires again at 9:17 and 41 seconds. This burst is shorter, tighter. The rounds pass close enough to destabilize the vehicle without destroying it. The glide body rolls 8 degrees right, overcorrects, and drops below the level flight it needed to reach the flight deck. 5 seconds remain. At 9:17 and 43 seconds, the Nulka decoy is directly under the weapon's terminal nose cone. At 9:17 and 44 seconds, the glide body commits, not to the ship, to the false target. It dives across the Abraham Lincoln's bow 96 meters ahead of the flight deck and hits the water 0.5 nautical miles off the starboard side at 9:17 and 45 seconds. And the detonation throws spray, shock, and blast across the forward hull hard enough to injure 9 sailors and buckle 1 non-critical deck plate by 0.4 centimeters. But the carrier itself is not penetrated. The armed aircraft on the bow do not detonate, and the catapults remain operational. The ship never stops sailing. At 9:17 and 52 seconds, the Seahawk's radar confirms the relay vessel south of the formation. It is not a commercial freighter. It is a converted coastal cargo ship with its deck containers arranged to hide an uplink mast and a retractable directional antenna. The crew tries to dump the mast and turn away. It is too late. At 9:18 and 11 seconds, the helicopter fires its first AGM-114 Hellfire. The second follows 3 seconds later. Yes, the relay ship burns from the bow to stern and sinks in 11 minutes with its transmission package still powered long enough for Reyes to capture the full handshake sequence that had guided the missile toward Abraham Lincoln. The response on the coast is harsher. At 9:19 and 06 seconds, Reyes finishes triangulating the origin of the missile's pre-separation handshake to a hardened control shelter 312 kilometers inland from the launch point, connected not to the mobile launcher itself, but to the network that paired launch data with the relay vessel's updates. Rear Admiral Carver authorizes immediate strike. At 9:24, 4 BGM-109 Tomahawk cruise missiles leave the escort's launch cells. 27 minutes later, the control shelter, the fiber relay building beside it, and the backup generator yard cease to exist. At 9:56 and 14 seconds, two FA-18F Super Hornets from Abraham Lincoln, the same deck the missile was supposed to turn into a secondary explosion, launch with GBU-31J DAMs and destroy the abandoned mobile launcher site on the Iranian coast. By 10:21, the ship is flying combat sorties again. Iran's plan that morning was not simply to hit a carrier. The plan was to create a weapon that turned a successful intercept into a false sense of safety, then use a civilian relay vessel to steer the real warhead into the most explosive part of the deck, after American doctrine had already spent its first answer on the wrong target. The long-range defense did exactly what it was supposed to do. It killed the booster. That was never the real fight. As the real fight began when a weapon the system thought was dead reappeared with 61 seconds left and a targeting update no radar operator could see on a scope. The Abraham Lincoln survived because one chief petty officer had spent 19 days paying attention to a burst transmission everyone else treated as noise, because he understood that the relay mattered more than the launcher, because he knew the difference between a missile guided from shore and a missile corrected from the sea, and because at 23 seconds to impact, he was willing to tell the bridge to break from the picture the system was still trying to defend. The relay ship was gone, the control shelter was gone, the launcher was gone, the carrier kept sailing. Flight operations resumed in 64 minutes. Iran had built a missile designed to make the defense irrelevant. And it failed because the one variable it did not calculate was the man who had already seen the hidden layer of the attack before the missile ever came back into the radar picture.